Step into a bustling medieval city, and your nose would be assaulted long before your eyes adjusted to the sights. In an age before sanitation, before perfume factories and scented candles, before even the idea of deodorant or indoor plumbing, the smells of a medieval city were a pungent blend of human existence. It was a world of aromas that modern noses would find overwhelming, but to the people of the time, it was just the scent of life. You would not have walked through those crowded streets breathing deeply with delight, would have been dodging more than just beggars and wagons. You would have been dodging stenches that clung to the cobblestones, floated in the air, and poured out of every alley and open window. The first thing to understand is that the medieval city was alive with people. Dense populations packed within thick defensive walls meant that cities like London, Paris, or Florence often became tightly woven mazes of buildings. Marketplaces, homes, and stables all crammed together. Without modern plumbing or garbage collection, that density led to an overwhelming amount of waste, both human and animal. Chamber pots were emptied into the streets. Horses left droppings everywhere. Pigs, dogs, and chickens roamed freely and added their own contributions to the muck. Rain might wash some of it away, but on dry days, the stench lingered and intensified under the heat of the sun. Human waste was a daily nuisance. Most homes did not have latrines, and even those that did typically had only rudimentary cesspits that had to be manually emptied. If you were poor, which most city dwellers were, your toilet might be nothing more than a bucket or a hole in a corner. Once full, that waste had to go somewhere, so it went out the window. There was a shout, something like "Gardes low." Here in French cities, a warning that waste was coming, but often not. The unfortunate passerby beneath might find themselves doused in what could only be described as the worst surprise imaginable. The sidewalks, if they existed at all, were smeared with this refuse. You can imagine the resulting stink, but human waste was just one part of the aromatic equation. Medieval people lived close to their animals. A family might have kept chickens in their kitchen, pigs in their backyard, or even a goat tied up near the front door. That meant constant exposure to animal droppings, barnyard musk, and the smell of unwashed fur and feathers. Stables were common inside city walls, and they were rarely cleaned thoroughly. You might wake up to the braying of a donkey, and you would smell it before you saw it. The collective odor of all these animals in one congested area created a baseline smell that permeated everything. Garbage added another layer to the olfactory mess. There were no trash bins or sanitation crews. People simply dumped their scraps into the street or alley where they would rot. Meat bones, moldy bread, spoiled vegetables. And broken pottery accumulated until someone, usually a city-appointed raker, came along with a cart to remove it. But this was irregular, and in hot weather the stench of rotting food was unbearable. Fish markets were especially offensive. Without refrigeration, fish had to be sold quickly. What remained at the end of the day was often left to fester until morning. The result was a sour, salty, gut-turning reek that hung in the air. Tanneries, those places where hides were treated to make leather, produced perhaps the most notorious stink of all. To tan a hide, medieval workers soaked it in a mix of water, lime, and urine. Then they used feces, sometimes dog or pigeon droppings, to soften the hides. The chemical reactions in this process released sulfuric, ammonia-laden clouds of horror that were so intense. Tanneries were usually located outside the city center, near rivers where the runoff could be washed away. But the smell could still carry for miles, and God help you if the wind changed direction. Even industries you might not associate with bad smells contributed to the general funk. Candle makers worked with animal fat, especially tallow, which gave off a greasy, meaty odor. Blacksmiths created smoke from coal and iron that had a metallic, acrid scent. Bakers, at least, offered some reprieve. The warm smell of fresh bread was one of the rare comforting smells in a medieval city, but it was often fleeting, quickly replaced by more pressing stenches. People themselves were part of the atmosphere. Personal hygiene in the Middle Ages was very different from today. While bathing wasn't unheard of, it was irregular for most. Water had to be hauled or heated, and bathhouses were expensive and sometimes associated with immorality. Most people relied on quick rinses, scented herbs, or just learned to tolerate body odor. The result was a population that smelled of sweat, dirt, and clothing that hadn't been properly washed in months. Imagine the crowded interiors of taverns or churches, filled shoulder to shoulder with unwashed bodies. It was stifling. Still, not every smell was unpleasant. The aroma of spiced wine, roasting meat, or open air cooking could sometimes cut through the stench, especially during festivals or feasts. Herbs like lavender and rosemary were scattered on floors to mask foul odors. People burned incense or fragrant wood like juniper. Apothecaries sold perfumed oils. Wealthier citizens might carry pomander, small, scented balls to breathe through when they walked the streets. These attempts at fragrance did not eliminate the problem, but they created momentary relief. Religious rituals also came with smells of their own. Churches were often filled with the rich, smoky perfume of frankincense and myrrh. The burning of these sacred substances was both spiritual and practical, covering the rank body heat of large congregations. Candles and wax added their own warm scent, contributing to the unique aroma of sacred spaces. Graveyards, on the other hand, were less pleasant. Many cities moved cemeteries outside the walls. Older churchyards still held the remains of centuries past, and poor burial conditions sometimes led to an unmistakable sourness in the air. Seasonal changes influenced everything. Summer made the smells worse. Heat intensified every rotting fish, every unwashed body, every pile of manure. In winter, some of it froze, dulling the edge of the stench, but smoky fires filled the air instead, making it heavy and hard to breathe. Spring brought blooming flowers and also melting filth. Autumn meant damp leaves mixed with garbage, creating a moldy, earthy funk. If you were born in a medieval city, you would have become accustomed to all this. Your nose would filter it out over time. Visitors from the countryside, however, often commented on the overwhelming nature of city smells. It could be so bad that travelers would turn back before reaching the gates. Disease spread quickly in this environment. Plague, cholera, dysentery, they all had a scent. Doctors, such as they were, believed in the power of smell, the miasma theory, that foul air caused illness. That's why plague doctors wore those long-beaked masks filled with herbs. They thought the sweet smells would protect them from the sickening air. Despite the overpowering odors, medieval cities were alive with energy, color, and human connection. They smelled like what they were: centers of trade, faith, labor, celebration, and survival. Every scent told a story. The smoke meant someone was warming their home. The fish guts meant someone was making a living. The manure on your boot meant goods were being moved through the market. It was a dirty, smelly world, but it was also full of life. Today, we might complain about the smell of a subway station or the garbage truck that passes by. But nothing compares to the constant sensory overload of a medieval city. It was a place where you could not avoid your environment. Every breath was a reminder that you were living close to the edge, sharing space with thousands of others, all trying to survive in the same enclosed, messy world. In the end, the smell of a medieval city was the smell of humanity itself. Raw, unfiltered, chaotic, and real. Thanks for stepping back in time with us to explore the nose-wrinkling world of medieval cities. It's wild to imagine how people managed to live day in and day out surrounded by the constant stench of waste. Animals, rotting food, and unwashed humanity. But for them, it was normal. Their noses adapted, their minds adjusted, and life carried on amid the smells we'd run from today. These scents weren't just gross details, they were part of a living, breathing world full of struggle, community, and survival. Every smell told a story of labor, trade, religion, or daily routine. If you enjoyed this journey into the sensory side of history, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more vivid looks into the past. Got a weird or interesting historical question you've always wondered about? Drop it in the comments. Love diving into the gritty, overlooked parts of history that textbooks skip. Until next time, take a deep breath of that fresh modern air and be glad you weren't walking through a medieval alleyway on a hot summer day. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.